All right, so what we're going to be looking at, is it presenting? Not yet.
No, it's not presenting.
All right, let me present. I have too many windows open. All right, so on Google Classroom, I shared with you this earlier today. Actually, did I share it? Yeah, it's here. Okay, this is just basically a guide for how to revise your story to add symbolism or imagery. Right, so we went over earlier in the year what symbolism and imagery are, right? So they're basically tools that a story writer can use to add certain aspects to a story that make it just better, right? So symbolism is when you have things that are used to represent other ideas. So in this last chapter we just read, we saw the button was used to kind of represent her father, right? And then imagery is basically just making sure that we have like a lot of details to support a certain scene. And then when you're looking at imagery, there's like the five senses that you basically pay attention to. So your sense of sight, smell, taste, touch, hearing. Now, so if I want to add symbolism or imagery to my story, these are basically the steps that I would go through. The first one is, all right, what is my story about? Right, so every single one of you guys should be writing a story, and there should be some sort of lesson that's learned from your story. Okay, so the first thing is first step is like, what is my story about? You need to know what your story is about and what the message is going to be for your story. Okay, then what you do is you go back into your story and you look for objects or places or actions that basically can be used for symbolism or to add imagery to. Then you would describe those things in detail, and then you increase the importance of those characters. And then you basically make sure that you do this not just in one place, but probably in a couple of places so that it gains that extra meaning. And then afterwards, what you might want to do though is after you made those changes, you look at the changes you made and say, is this making my story make more sense or is it making it more confusing? Sometimes you might just want to take it away. It just might do a little too much. So if we look at the story that um, I was writing, right? So I had my story about this girl, Svetlana. Um, and Svetlana is basically, she's dealing with not feeling that she fits in, right? So because she's not fitting in, she's she's having all kinds of issues, right? Um, so this is basically a scene that I wrote for my story. But what I want to do is I want to see if I can add some symbolism to this. So this is her. She's at a party, and she's basically noticing that there's these two girls that are in her class that are kind of being nasty, um, and she's going to confront them, right? So now when I wrote this, I didn't say, all right, well, what can I add imagery wise or symbolism wise that'll kind of just like add more impact into it. So let's just read it first and see like the changes that I can make. So I have, as I walked down the hallway, I listened for other kids' voices. I knew some of my friends must have been somewhere, but I also really wanted to find the popular kids like Luz and Maeve. I know, that's so funny, I heard from the doorway on the left. I was pretty sure it was Maeve's voice. I walked a few more steps, not sure if I should go into the room or not. I've never laughed so hard in my life, said Liz, her voice sounding so happy. I turned to the doorway and I saw them in a room that must have been Liz's bedroom. So again, what I'm going to wind up doing eventually is just have this confrontation amongst the characters, right? So Svetlana's going to wind up having drama with these girls. But what I want to do is I can kind of use symbolism and imagery to kind of add some more impact to the story. So what I can do is I can use the hallway and I can use like the doorway as symbolic um, things, right? So sometimes you see like especially like in a scary movie, right? They use like darkness and long hallways to represent things. In certain movies, they'll use a doorway as like a choice that someone has to make, so they have to like go in a certain direction. Right? So these like extra symbolic meanings. So what I'm going to do is basically add just a little bit of symbolism by just like using the hallway to do that. And look what I'm going to do. So instead of saying, so I walk down the hallway, I can kind of make some changes to it. So my new beginning will look like this. I headed into the hallway. Right. So again, I'm just changing what I have up here and just adding to it. Right. It was much longer then my hallway at home, and sort of empty. Right, so now what I'm doing by adding these details is I'm kind of creating this whole almost like fear and isolation, right? So just kind of comparing it to the house that you're living in, um, saying that it's empty, the fact that she feels alone, right? So just adding these little bit of details kind of just add a little bit of impact. My hallway at home was covered with pictures of my family, and it was bright and filled with light. Okay, so again, I'm adding details here that kind of just show the mood of this hallway, how she's feeling. Instead of being in this bright situation that she's used to in her house, this one's darker, right? So this one was plain and had nothing on the walls. And since someone had turned out the lights, it was dark and creepy. Right, so I'm kind of setting up this mood by just adding all of these little pieces of imagery that instead of just saying I'm walking down the hallway, how can I create this mood that actually adds to my story? I add these little bits of detail. Okay. Um, Now, as I walked, sorry, down the hallway, I listened for other kids' voices. I knew some of my friends must have been somewhere, but I also really wanted to find the popular kids, like Goose and Maeve. So again, um, all I did was I added a little bit of detail to that hallway to kind of create this setting, this mood, and again using imagery to kind of get through to that. Now, what another thing I can do is at the bottom here, where I have a doorway. Again, I can use that doorway to be symbolic also. So if I look at the doorway, I can add like a feature such as like light, right? So again, I'm not writing this part here. I would just add this part, right? So I just copy and paste it. So again, I like this is fine for me. I copy paste it. I'm fine with the beginning. But now, did I do that? Yeah. Now I'm looking at the doorway and I say, all right, let me add some more details here to this doorway to kind of like make it represent um, it's like a little bit of a choice that she's going to be making. So what I could actually do is add like a little bit of personification. So I'll write something like, I turned to the glowing. Now I add like this whole feature of light, beckoning, which means calling for, right? That's a type of personification. Doorway, and saw them in a room that must have been Liz's bedroom. Right, so it's almost like I have this girl walking through this uh, room that she doesn't even necessarily have control of. It's like the room is calling for her to come inside of it. Like she's about to deal with this dramatic situation, and I'm making this doorway like pull her in. It's like calling for her to go inside of it. Okay, so this whole process of looking at what you have written and basically thinking, all right, so where can I add little elements of imagery to build up the feel of the story, to build up the setting? Um, is there any places where I can add symbolism, right? Is there like a certain object or a place that can have a certain feel to it? So what you're going to do today is you're just basically going to go into your writing, right? You guys have like a half an hour. And you're going to look to see if there's any places where you can make these changes. Is there places where I can add more detail to kind of set up the mood? Is there places where I can add maybe a symbolic object that represents something in my story? Okay, so again, what you guys are doing right now, you're going to just continue working on your writing and just seeing if you could add any types of imagery, symbolism, any types of figurative language in general. All right, so that's what you guys are working on right now.